Hey friends, we are trying another one of these video type posts today. You all don't know this, but I've been experimenting with these kinds of videos a whole lot over the past year. I just never ended up posting any of them after the first Georgette Heyer one for various reasons, but we'll see if this one ever makes it anywhere. But I thought it would be nice to do a bit of a TBR check-in, both as a way to keep me on track and as kind of a combination haul wrap-up type thing. I don't know. It was going to be quarterly, but I delayed it because of Ramadan, and it turns out I have quite a lot to report from April, so I figured I'd just include 4 months. And if this one works out, it might be quarterly for the rest of the year, it might be 4 months, I don't know, it might be 6 months, who knows. Just depends when I have enough to say for it to be worth a video, I guess. So hopefully this is interesting to other people as well as me. Okay, for the purposes of this video, I'm including, number one, obviously my physical TBR, including my 10 books to read in 2023 list, but not just that. Also my ebook TBR, which I haven't really talked about much on here, but we'll get to that. And also my 5 series to finish in 2023 list, which are all books I don't currently own, but I do want to read this year. So, starting with my physical TBR, I started the year with 21 books. In the last 4 months, I've managed to read 5 of those, but somehow, just in March and April, I've also managed to gain 5, although, in fairness, only one of those is a book that I bought for myself, and I have read that one. The others were all either gifts and or they're books that belong to other people in my household that I also want to read, because I also count those when I'm tracking my TBR. So, in order of acquisition, they are number 1, Ramadan Reflections by Alia Umrayan. This one I bought specifically to read in Ramadan, and I did do that, so we'll talk about that in a second when I do the wrap-up bit. Next was Win Every Argument by Mehdi Hasan. This is actually one my mum bought. Again, I'm including it on this list. Mehdi Hasan is a political journalist. He works in the US now, and I think he's fairly well known among leftist circles, but he's a British Indian Muslim originally, and he's extremely well known and celebrated among British Muslims, and he's particularly known for being a really eloquent debater and a tough interviewer. So this is his new book, which is just about debating and arguing in the age of fake news. I think it's told through examples of his most famous debates and interviews, so I think it should just be really interesting. We also then have Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. This one I bought for my sisters for Eid, but I also want to read it. It's the only book I got for them that I haven't already read myself. But they like magic and adventure stories, and I have heard only good things about it since it came out, so I hope they will like it, and I'm also excited to finally get to it. Then we have The Treasury of Aisha by Sophia Rahman. This is a new release. My neighbour went to a publicity event that the author was doing and very kindly brought us a copy. It's about kind of the legacy of Aisha bint Abu Bakr, who was one of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and she's just, a major figure in Islamic history. And I'm a little trepidatious about this one because I've been following Sophia Rahman for some time. She's a scholar who researches Islam and gender, which can be a dicey field, and she promotes some super controversial people. I found it hard to pin down her own exact opinion, and I just read an essay of hers in Cut from the Same Cloth, which I'm also about to talk about in this video, which that had some really excellent points and some really iffy moments. So approaching this one with caution, but I'm hoping it will still have some valuable things to say, even if I don't agree with everything in it. We'll see. And then finally, I just received Queen of the Tiles by Hannah Alkaf, which was an Eid present from the wonderful Cara at Wild Book Garden. Thank you so much, Cara. I have read one other book and a short story by Hannah Alkaf, and I absolutely loved them both. And basically everyone I know has been loving Queen of the Tiles lately, so I'm so excited to get to this one. So now, for the books I've read, I started off really strong in January, and I read 3 physical TBR books straight off. The first one was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I had an arc of this from Orbit, and I'll link to my full review. I have this system where I don't count NetGalley e-arcs among my ebook TBR, but I do count physical arcs among my physical TBR. Don't question it, it's just how my system works. I think my expectations for this were slightly too high, particularly because of the Olivia Atwater comparisons, and I think that let me down slightly, but kind of leaving those aside, I do think it was a really solid read. I don't think it'll be a lasting favourite, but it was a solid 4 stars, and I'm looking forward to the sequel. The cover's just been released and the synopsis, and it sounds like it's going to be set in Cambridge, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, all in all, would recommend. Decent read. It's a fun time. The next was Moth Smoke by Morrison Hamid. This is literary crime fiction. Is that a genre? I hated every single second of it. Every character was just the worst. I didn't care what happened to any of them. And the writing was just like one of those kinds of literary fiction that's obsessed with like the grossness of the human body and constantly talking about sweat and bodily fluids just to be edgy. I didn't like it. And I've read one other Mohsin Hamid book a few years ago, which I don't really remember much about, except that I also didn't like it. And I thought at the time maybe I had just missed something, but at least having read this, I can now say that I've tried him, I've given him 2 chances, and the things that I didn't like about Moth Smoke, I'm pretty sure are author things, not specific to the story things, so I think I can safely say that I'm not interested in any more from him. And the last one I read in January was The Tea Trolley by Rohana Alam, which unfortunately was also a book by a Pakistani author that I also hated. Like, my luck is just not going well this year. This one, basically it boils down to a bunch of vignettes about various people from different classes and backgrounds and their marriages, but every single marriage is just miserable and or like outright abusive, so the whole book is just such a struggle and you really have to drag yourself. I think it's around 200 pages. It's not a long book, but it was just such a struggle, and it was not good. So yeah, that one was also a disappointment. Then in February I didn't read any physical TBR books, and in March I finished one, which was This Time Will Be Different by Misa Sugura. This was also a disappointment. It's really not going well. I didn't care about any of the characters, and I thought the book was trying to cram in too many issues that didn't have time to address them all properly, especially because the romance took up way too much space and also wasn't particularly interesting romance. And I've read other YA contemporaries that are more successful at all of the things this book was trying to do, so it just wasn't my favourite. I think I gave it 3 stars. Like, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't particularly memorable either. And finally, in Ramadan, so across March and April, I read Ramadan Reflections by Alia Umrayan. This was like just as incredible as everyone has been saying it is. It's a journal type book that has a prompt for every day in Ramadan with like a bit of blurb and then journal prompts. And I thought it was incredibly valuable. Kind of really, none of the stuff was groundbreaking, but something about sitting down every day and thinking about it was really perspective shifting. A lot of the chapters made me cry. Made me think a lot about my life and where I am and where I want to be in terms of both this life and my relationship with God, and I really, really highly recommend. So numbers wise, I'm at a net 0 right now, which is not ideal, but I have read 3 books off my 10 books in 2023 list, which is as many as I read from my 2022 list in the entire year last year. So already an improvement in that sense, and hopefully be making some more progress the rest of the year. Quality wise, they've been a mixed bag, as you can tell. So very much hoping I'll have better things to report with the rest of the books or whatever I've read by the next check-in. We'll see how it goes. Wish me luck. Moving on to my ebook TBR. I'm not going to do numbers for this because I actually have another project in mind for my Kindle TBR. We'll see if it ever materialises. Stay tuned to see if it ever does, I guess. But in the meantime, I have read 5 books from my ebook TBR so far this year, which is pretty good progress. In January, the first one was The Tears of a Dragon by Intisar Khanani. This is a novella set in the Dauntless Path world, which you'll all know are some of my absolute favourite books. I love Intisar Khanani's writing and just her whole vibe as a person and as an author. And this novella was as sweet and as lovely as you would expect. If you're at all a fan of this world, I definitely recommend. It's not spoilery either, so you could even read it without having read the main novels. It's a prequel. So yeah, that was great. And then in March and into Ramadan, I read the Islamic books that I had been accumulating. The first one, which I read actually before Ramadan, was Cut from the Same Cloth, which is a collection of essays by 20 different British Muslim women. I actually backed this on Unbound, which is kind of like Kickstarter, but specifically for books, a few years ago, so I've had it since then. I finally read it. I loved this collection. My Goodreads review has Full of Thoughts, which, by the way, lately I've been trying to put down like a few thoughts on Goodreads for every book I finish, and I always intend for it to be just a couple of sentences, but often it turns into basically a full review, so come find me over there if you're interested in seeing those thoughts. But yeah, my Goodreads review for this goes into my favourite essays and all that sort of stuff, but all in all, I really, really related to this book. I thought every single essay had at least something interesting or valuable to say, and I was just really impressed by like how wide-ranging the topics were and how it showed that Muslim women can have so many different perspectives while all still practicing like in a mainstream accepted way mostly. So yeah, that was great. And then in Ramadan I read 3 books. The first one was Sustenance of the Soul by Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, translated by Malik Badri. This is a translation of a 9th century manuscript about looking after your mental health. I actually downloaded it last Ramadan after it was mentioned by one of the guests on the Yaqeen Institute's Quran 30 for 30 series. I don't remember who the guest was or which episode. But yeah, I downloaded it then and I finally got to it this Ramadan. And again, I have much fuller thoughts on Goodreads, but overall I thought it was really interesting and valuable, both kind of as a historical document and also like had surprisingly insightful advice about contemporary psychology. So yeah, like good advice that we can still apply today. I also then read Contemplation and Islamic Psychospiritual Study, which is an original work by Malik Badri, the translator of Sustenance of the Soul, who was himself a psychologist much more recently. And this is about the kind of the practice of reflection. So he goes through Western psychology about the benefits of meditation and combines it with Islamic scholarship on the importance of reflecting on God. And I kind of expected it to have more concrete advice than it did, but for a book so short, it's under 200 pages, it was surprisingly wide-ranging and it did say a lot of useful things, so I do recommend. And finally I read When the Stars Prostrated by Muhammad al-Shanawi and Rani Abu Isnaini. This is a really short book that goes verse by verse through Surah Yusuf, which is one of the chapters of the Quran, and just draws out various different lessons or reflections from every verse. I thought it was really valuable and thought-provoking. Definitely gave me like some new perspectives on that surah and that story. It's the story in Hebrew Joseph, who, you know, gets thrown down the well by his brothers and then ends up ruling Egypt, so on. And the idea of it is also for readers to be able to like take some of the techniques that the authors use for reflection on the Quran and apply it to your own Quran reading. So I'm hoping that will also add depth to my kind of engagement with the Quran going forward. And then finally my series TBR. So this is a 5 series that I've already started that I want to finish in 2023, which is, I think it's 8 books overall. I've only read 1 so far, which was In the Serpent's Wake, which is the sequel to Test of the Road by Rachel Hartman. And this was really weird and completely different to Test of the Road. I did like it, but I kind of also don't know what to do with it. Again, I have basically a full review on Goodreads. I go into a lot of detail if you're interested, but yeah, I don't know how to classify this series. Every book in it is so different, and this was just not what I expected it to be, but also was interesting. I don't know if you've read it. Please come and talk to me about it, because I really don't know. As you can tell, I'm just perplexed by this book. But yeah, that's the only one I've read from that TBR, so still the rest to go. We'll see if and when I get to those. So yeah, that is my progress on the books that I have been aiming to read in 2023. Numbers wise, like, not bad. Quality wise, questionable. No, actually, all the Kindle books that I read were amazing. I loved them all. The physical books, more of a mixed bag. A couple were really great. Ramadan Reflections was incredible. The rest were, a little bit less consistent. But yeah, hopefully I'll have better luck with the rest of my TBR. Let me know what you've been reading lately, and if TBR is one of your goals for 2023. I know it's one of lots of people's goals. If it is one of your goals, let me know how it's going. I hope this was interesting. Thank you for making it to the end. If you have, we'll see if anyone ever sees this other than me, and if hopefully I'll be back with another one in a few months.